Hey friend! You may have heard that recently I left my full-time job at Uber after working there for 4 years, and I've just started a new role at a company based here in Toronto called Wealthsimple. I did a Q&A video all about why I left my job, what I'm looking forward to at a company like Wealthsimple, and you can go and check that video out over here. In this video, I want to walk you through my portfolio presentation that I used when I was interviewing at Wealthsimple, and that ultimately led to me getting this job. I have in the past uploaded a video all about the portfolio that got me hired at Uber 4 years ago. So this is going to be a look at more of my recent work, my recent projects that I did at Uber, and the presentation that I did to get the job. Let's jump on over to Figma. All right, here we are in Figma, and this is my opening title slide that has my name, the role that I currently had, and a photo of me. Then on the next slide, I have kind of broken up this presentation into chapters. So I start with chapter 1, which is kicking off with a little bit more about me in case the people aren't familiar with my background, who I am, or I'm interviewing with people that haven't heard of me before. So in the first slide, I kind of walk through what I do. So at the time, I was currently a product designer on the merchant design team at Uber Eats. I also talked a little bit about the side projects that I have, like the podcast that I co-host called Design Life, and the sort of YouTube stuff that I do here on YouTube with you all, and then also some of my experience being a public speaker talking at conferences and meetups. I like to start with this kind of about me slide because it gives the interviewers a bit of a flavor of like who I am, what kind of designer I am, and some of my contributions to the wider design community. Next, I share a little bit about my philosophy as a designer. I think it's always a really competitive advantage and kind of a unique selling point almost to include your personal design philosophies or design values and sort of how you see and approach design, because that can make you really stand apart from other candidates. So here's 3 philosophies that I share, and I kind of talk through each of these and what this means to me in my daily practice as a designer. Next, I always share my approach. This is kind of a really high-level overview of my design process. I don't go too deep into this because I figured that the people I'm interviewing with have a pretty good understanding of design process. So I just kind of gloss over this to kind of show at a high level the typical design process or journey I take when working on projects. So that's the end of chapter 1. And honestly, usually I find that takes about 10 minutes to get through, including sort of like people arriving a few minutes late, kind of doing some little intros at the beginning. So for a 60-minute portfolio presentation, that's already the first 10 minutes done. And so now we get into chapter 2, which is the work and the case studies. Now, I had 3 case studies prepared to show. Typically, I don't often get through 3 projects. I find that it usually takes 30 or like 20 minutes to go through each project, but I always have 3 just in case there's time for an extra one. The first project that I included in this presentation is a project where we created a product experience to allow drivers to apply for a microloan from Uber. Now, this project did not ever ship, but the reason that I included it in this portfolio presentation, and especially the reason I included it as the first project, was because of the context of who Wealthsimple is as a company, as a business. They're in fintech, they're all about creating investing accounts and trading. And so I felt like this was a very applicable case study to walk through to talk about my experience working on money-related products. So even though this project didn't have any business impact, I still included it and included it as the first project because it was recent and relevant. Now, because this project never shipped, I'm not able to actually walk through this project on YouTube in this video. So I'm going to skip this one and move to the next project where it has shipped and it is live, so I can walk through the project for you. With the way the design industry is going, learning how to prototype is a no-brainer. Instead of putting flat files in front of your team, manager, or clients, imagine being able to hand them an interactive prototype that's so good it feels like the real app or website. I'm grateful to Framer, who is the sponsor of today's video. Now, Framer is a no-code, free-to-use tool that makes it easy for anyone to become a prototyper. Their mission is to help you get as close as you can to the real thing. You can create your own smart components with multiple states without any code and drop in pre-built components straight from Framer's insert menu. You can also make your own delightful custom animations 100% visually. In just a couple of hours, you could have a new skill that can help you stand out from others within the crowd. You can sign up for Framer for free at framer.com/femke. That link is also in the description below for you. Okay, so my second project here is Cashier's Collection, which is a project I did at Uber back in 2018. And even though this project is a little bit old at this point, I still included it here as my second project because it is also money and finance related. And I think it's always really important to show any relevant experience you have in the industry of the job that you're applying for. Okay, so let's walk through this. I'm not going to present this per se here on YouTube, but I'm just going to kind of walk through the format that I did for talking about this case study. So always starting with the problem. Here is a really strong and key problem statement and showing a visual and a little bit of context, and also including here kind of the problem broken down into numbers to kind of show the size, the scale, and the impact that this problem was having on the business. Then talking a little bit about the goals, always important to share upfront what the end goal is of a project and what you're working to achieve. And then I kind of start going through my design process. So beginning a little bit with research, I talk a little bit about some of the key findings from the research that we did. And I talk about how we traveled to Mexico and we traveled to Brazil and we did a lot of in-person group roundtable research sessions. We did a lot of prototype testing and learned a lot about how drivers felt about the problem that we were trying to solve. So talking a little bit about the impact of the research there before moving on to the proposed solution that we came up with. So after the research we did, here's the proposed solution, pros and cons of that solution, sharing a little bit about the design principles that we came up with that kind of informed the solution and the outcomes that follow. Then walking through the user journey that we came up with and key solution elements, which I don't often talk about these much in my video. And to be fair, I don't always have this for every project, but having key solution elements for this project felt very important and was very relevant to the problem that we were trying to solve. So included these as well and talked a little bit about what each of these key solution elements meant, how we came up with these key solution elements. So in this case, working a lot with the product manager, reflecting on the research we did. So talking about how we kind of collaborated and came up with these and why they were important for the project. Next, this is a slide of like a lot of different design explorations we were going through. I think my voiceover here was something about like, you know, we went really wide, we did a lot of different explorations and we tried to kind of explore different ways of how we could sort of bring the product solution to life. Then showing a little bit about the information architecture, not a super sexy slide per se, but just kind of showing how we're thinking sort of about like the service design, the flows, the UX, and kind of how a user is going to kind of navigate through this experience. Then next, I shared two different approaches we had to executing on the solution that we wanted to go with. So here I kind of walk through this first approach that we had, and then in the next slide, the second approach that we had, and then that's kind of followed up with some user testing. So we took those two approaches, we then went into some user testing to find out how our users felt about these two different approaches and get some feedback. And I kind of share the key takeaways and the key feedback that we got through those sessions. And I also talk a little bit about the solution that we eventually decided to go with. Then I talk about this sort of moment that happened in the project where we uncovered something that we weren't expecting before. And in this case, you know, we saw that drivers were kind of going next through a flow and weren't really paying attention to the detail on the screen. So then I talk a little bit about how we solved that problem and how we tried to avoid that happening. And so here I talk a little bit about adding friction to the flow and then also giving more flexibility and letting drivers start the flow over again in case they got to the end and realized, oh, I didn't read what was on the screen, for example. So just using this to kind of talk about learnings that came up throughout the project and how we approached improving those. All right, then my last few slides are on the final design. So walking through the final flows, kind of showing a high level of all of the different user stories and sort of what the flows are for each of those user stories. And then I also included a slide here on collaborating with content. We have dedicated content writers at Uber, so talking a little bit about that process, and then also mentioning how I did the handoff with engineering. Lastly, I always end each case study with the business impact. So in this case, I shared the results and I've blurred out the numbers here just to be safe, but essentially the blurred out bits are dollar amounts of each of these different metrics. So making sure that I'm really spelling out the impact that this project had on the business from a financial perspective. For this project, I also ended with an extra special slide at the end showing recent visual design updates, because this project was originally done in 2018, 2019, and since then we had an update to our design system at Uber, and so I showed the sort of updated visual designs with the new design system. Moving on to the third project, which is a very recent one from 2020, which is Uber Eats Ads Manager. So this project, the context was more presented in the framing of an opportunity rather than a problem. So for this project, we wanted to bring ads into the Uber Eats experience, which, if you think about it, is not really solving any kind of problem, but it was a really huge opportunity for the business. So instead of beginning with a problem statement, in this case, I started with the opportunity. Next, again, going into the goals, what we hope to achieve with this project, and then similar to the other project, starting with the research, talking a little bit about the research we did, where we did it, and what kind of the key outcomes, learnings, and findings were from that research, which are these 4 key takeaways here. Then talking again about the proposed solution. So after reflecting on the research and doing some problem solving and brainstorming, we decided on this particular proposed solution, which was, in this case, adding ads into our existing restaurant manager tool. Again, showing the design principles and kind of voice-overing why these principles are important, how we came up with them, and then showing the high-level journey map for this particular project. And then I think in this case, I was talking a lot about creating the prototypes and sort of doing a lot of different user testing and just showing the complexity here of some of the different things that we were testing at the time. Then I wanted to go deep into a particular kind of area of the project that I was trying to problem solve through. So in this case, I was leading the campaign management part of this project, and I was going through a lot of different iterations and explorations of how to exactly create this experience. And so here I'm kind of showing a lot of different options and kind of, I believe I voiced over here some of the challenges and the pain points with that particular experience. All right, then showing final designs for the key different parts of the project. So education and entry points, campaign creation, and nodding to my colleague Angie, who actually did this part of the project, the campaign management, and talking about some of the final design decisions, the rationale behind the final solution we eventually landed on, editing campaigns. So yeah, just really walking through the final designs and flows and sort of key parts of the experience. Then talking a little bit about the design documentation that we did together as a team. There was a lot of collaboration for this project. Again, mentioning the handoff and how we kind of finally handed off the work, and ending always on the business impact and sort of the key outcomes or results of this project. So again, I've blurred out the numbers here, but above are sort of the metrics for the key goals that we had and some of the impact that this project had at Uber. Okay, so that was the meaty part of the presentation, the case studies and the work. So I believe that took up like most of the time of the 60 minutes that we had. And so often in the last 5 minutes, I like to wrap up with like kind of a final pitch rather than just kind of like ending like here on the last case study slide. I like to wrap it up nicely. So chapter 4 is the final pitch. And in these final slides, I just talk a little bit about what sets me apart, why they should hire me, the value I can bring to the company. I also always like to include these little kind of testimonials, which are from different colleagues that I've worked with over the years, and some nice things that people have said about me in things like performance reviews or, sent these nice messages to my manager, for example. And then yeah, just ending on a really nice thank you slide. So that was a look at the exact presentation that I used when interviewing for my job at Wealthsimple. I have done another video that has a template all about how to create your portfolio presentation. You can go and watch that here and grab the free template to kind of help you kickstart your portfolio presentation. I hope this has been really helpful for you. And also I'm starting up my mentoring services again soon in September. And so if you are looking for one-on-one mentoring with me, maybe you want to go through your own portfolio presentation to get some feedback or advice before your interview, feel free to book a session with me over on SuperPeer. Have a great week. Talk to you next time. Bye.